Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing another deity build, this time for Cyric. Like with all of my deity builds, I got help theory crafting this from members of the community over on my live streams. So if you want to be a part of this series in the future, especially since it's starting to near its conclusion, please do keep an eye out for future live streams. I've been slacking on them a little bit, but I hope to get back into the swing of things soon, especially when we do our kind of big, almost kind of finale to the deity build kind of series, when we're planning to do a stream focused on the Dead 3 as one big longer stream where we kind of make the full thing together. Anyways, speaking of the Dead 3, today we're doing Cyric. He is, as a lot of you might already know, as this is quite a popular character, even getting his own novel called The Prince of Lies. Cyric is, or was, I should say, the Faerunian god of lies, trickery, and strife, and even previously used to be in charge of tyranny, murder, lies, intrigue, and illusion. Tyranny and murder might sound a bit familiar to those of you who have played BG3, yet basically Cyric, alongside Jurgle in a sense, basically used to be the one guy that now the Dead 3 have kind of split into. Not literally, of course. I mean, the Dead 3 basically inherited these dominions from Cyric himself, because Cyric was kind of a big deal. A big enough deal to murder Mystra, and cause an event called the Spell Plague, which I won't get into here, but I believe Gale does reference him as well, briefly, kind of in his backstory as well. So Cyric is a very, very big deal, or again, he used to be. Unfortunately, he's kind of faded into obscurity now as far as the Faerunian pantheon goes, because, well, he killed the god of magic and kind of set the world into one of the most apocalyptic scenarios it's ever been in. And as such, he's kind of been shunned by everybody, followers and other gods alike. Not that he was necessarily well-liked before. Cyric is kind of a... well, he's kind of fucking insane, to put it mildly. He basically has a fascination with killing. He just was this monomaniacal asshole who... and I'm not mincing my words here, this dude sucked. But, like, and he just would kill people, he'd prank people, he'd just do a whole bunch of awful, awful deeds. But it does come from a place that's, well, not sympathetic, but at the end of the day, he was just a very, very lonely person who decided to go down an extremely awful route in life, I guess. I'm definitely paraphrasing this a lot, but Cyric himself, it could have been different. Perhaps, but he is a petty, nasty, nasty dude who has just done some of the worst things imaginable, again, including killing a god. So, with this chosen, and I say chosen in quotations, because I don't think Cyric would straight up go out of his way to be like, ah, yes, this person will be my chosen and they will fight under my order, like most other deities would. I believe Cyric, for this specific character, is just straight up screwing with them. There's this character in this very obscure franchise that you've probably never heard of, and he has this quote: "All it takes is one bad day, and you'll be just like me." And I think Cyric, in whatever small amount of power he has remaining nowadays, decided to just pick this individual and just basically do to them what happened to him. This individual would probably start off as a regular person, but those little inklings of madness would slowly start to peek in as Cyric's, you know, trickery influence starts to take hold. And as this character levels up, they'll slowly go more and more mad, inflicting that madness onto others. And as such, this is a Dark Urge build, because, well, Bull and Cyric do already have a history, and I think it would be very, very funny for Cyric to kind of mess with the Bull spawn. I do think there is some precedence there for him to do that. Or if you don't really like that sort of storyline, then perhaps maybe this character just is one of the very, very few people who still finds, you know, some value in worshipping Cyric. Cyric does still have a small cult following about spreading trickery, madness, and deceit, and maybe this character is just doing that. But I kind of like the idea of, a bit similar to my old Call of Cthulhu Investigator build, Like, basically Cyric just kind of getting a hold of this dude and just thinking, you know what, let's see what happens. So this is going to be a bit of a different build as well. I'm going to be exploring something that I've never really explored before on this channel. As you'll see from the combat footage, you can probably guess what I kind of went for here, but we'll get to that in a minute. Basically the whole idea was that I wanted to try something a bit new, and again kind of use the leveling scheme that I've gone for to kind of, you know, show this mental descent into madness through levels. And I have to be pretty mad. You'd have to be pretty mad to do what I did with this build as well. Also, another thing that makes this build somewhat unique in the case of other than just the kind of leveling I went for, is that this is maybe my first kind of real attempt at a true solo build. I did kind of design this build with solo play in mind, kind of using the stealthy solo tactics that most of you have probably come to know, as well as while I didn't really get to test it in too much length in my own testing, because this build still works quite well in frontline combat when it's given the opportunity, there is a lot of different ways to kind of mess with the battlefield, approach things from a completely new way, and just have a bit of fun with it. So while I maybe wouldn't recommend a full solo run with this build, if there's like certain points in Act 1, Act 2, or Act 3 where you kind of get to take advantage of maybe like bigger interiors with lots of enemies, like perhaps in Act 2, for example, the Moonrise Towers, or in Act 1, the Goblin Camp, and I won't say anything about Act 3 because spoilers, you will have a pretty fun time with this one. And since this is basically a single class build as well, the progression is going to feel quite natural. I test these builds at 4, 8, 10, and 12, and overall I feel like this build does do pretty nicely. Again, you do have to play it very, very differently, so don't expect to just play Baldur's Gate 3 walking into any encounter and just getting away with it. You're going to want to think tactically, using all sorts of crazy techniques that kind of fit in with the madness vibe to get the job done, and we'll get a ton of abilities that are going to make this really, really interesting. I've probably exhausted the combat footage by now because this combat footage is kind of short. Again, I kind of wanted to show a very specific scenario to kind of get a vibe of what this build's going for, so let's just get into it. We're going to be kicking things off as a rogue. Whenever I want to make a character that kind of starts out as just a regular person, rogue is kind of what I go for. Rogue has enough going for it that it's still a interesting class at level 1, but it's definitely, in my opinion, the closest to just kind of a regular person who wouldn't normally rely on more D&D-esque combat or magic abilities. Basically, because, again, someone who kind of just lives their life but has a little bit of aptitude other than being a regular person would probably be somebody with a lot of skill proficiencies, not too much combat expertise, but definitely would be able to use some more common weapons. Hand crossbows and longswords definitely come to mind. And I've also gone for a high half-elf here to give us an extra cantrip, because we are going to be using intelligence for this build. So I picked up friends, and again, being just kind of good at conversation and being able to manipulate people in that way, friends, in my opinion, does make sense. But yes, so starting off as rogue, we are going to get things like sneak attack, as always, which is always great, just adding a bit of extra damage to our melee and ranged attacks when we have advantage. As for our ability score points, here's what I have. Strength is at 8 because we don't need it. Dexterity is going to be to give us high AC and a higher chance to hit with our weapons. Constitution is at 14. This build isn't really going to be a frontline combatant, but we do want a bit of Constitution to at least give us a decent pool of HP, a decent chance to succeed concentration saving throws, as well as, you know, just being a good stat in general, just kind of for the reasons I listed. However, so this build can fight, but you definitely want to make it so it's kind of like being like a little bit, you kind of want to be able to dip in and out of combat with kind of like the stealthy rogue playstyle, being able to disengage and hide and do all that sort of thing when you need to. Also, we've got intelligence at 16 here. This is going to be our primary spellcasting modifier. Don't click off the video yet. Yes, we are using that subclass, but trust me, it works here. I don't want to... Just trust me on this. Wisdom is at 8. I would like this higher, but I did kind of prefer to have charisma in this build more, because again, lies, deceit, we want to be good at the kind of charisma skills, so, you know, which we'll get into now, actually. Because we start off as a rogue, we do get a lot of skill proficiencies as well as to expertise. I've, of course, picked up acrobatics to make it so we can resist being shoved. Sleight of hand, so we're able to pickpocket. I've gone for the criminal background to give us stealth and deception, so that we are good at lies right off the bat, as well as being able to sneak, and we can pop our expertise into into deception and stealth, because again, we're a chosen, in quotations, of Cyric, so we are going to be wanting to be very good at stealth and deception, so in our case, this is perfect. I've also gone for intimidation and persuasion, so we are basically the face of the party. Not as effective as maybe a sorcerer or a bard, but it still works out pretty well, especially since we'll be able to pick up even more expertise a bit later on. Next up at Rogue Level 2, we're going to get our typical cunning action stuff, allowing us to dash, hide, and disengage as a bonus action. These are all going to be super important. Disengage less so, we definitely want hide and dash more, because this build's whole playstyle is going to be running around and dashing and hiding in order to kind of position ourselves, be able to get away from the front of combat, to either allow us to basically escape and then kind of reset the encounter and be able to come back in with a new strategy later, or allowing our allies to kind of take the brunt of it so we can sneak in and do a bit more later. Again, this build does work as a solo build, but like any build that I showcase, it does work better in a team. But you could absolutely try to do some solo shenanigans with this too, if you like. Next up, we get to choose our subclass. Now, obviously, Thief is great, Assassin would be perfect, but I wanted to do something different. We're making a character based on trickery and lies, and being able to drive others mad and all this sort of thing. So we're going with Arcane Trickster. Now, Arcane Trickster is widely regarded as being one of the worst classes in this game, maybe even D&D as well, but don't quote me on that, I'm not as versed in that sort of sphere of influence. But Arcane Trickster is going to give us a lot of things that actually I really like for this build. First off, we're going to get the Mage Hand Legerdemain. This gives us a version of Mage Hand that is now permanent, and it is completely invisible and can carry out certain additional tasks. Basically, what the Mage Hand Legerdemain can do for us here is, because it is invisible, it can scout out enemy locations. Basically, send this thing in, use it to kind of look around, because obviously the way the camera works at Baldur's Gate 3 is we have to follow the entity, so we can basically scout out locations for free even, and then we can just place it somewhere and get it ready to help us, because the Mage Hand Legerdemain is going to be able to do some things for us here. Namely, it's going to be able to throw things. You will be able to use this to be able to throw all sorts of items at your enemies, making them kind of distracted away from you, so that you can kind of like stealth around and do what you need to do. So it can be, if you place it right, a little bit of extra offense. And again, what is more crazy, what is more on theme for a kind of madness trickery build, but just having this invisible hand just lobbing freaking explosive barrels or weapons or what have you at the enemy, and everyone's like, where is it coming from? I think it can be quite interesting, but of course, this is kind of just like a kind of fun feature of the build, not necessarily the main playstyle that I'm going for, but if you set it correctly, it can absolutely work. Next up, we're going to get to cantrips. I already grabbed Friends from being a high half-elf, but if you want to play a different race, you would definitely pick it up here. As well as we are going to get an extra cantrip on top of that as well, but here we get two, so that's what I'm going to show off. Obviously, we want Minor Illusion. Minor Illusion is going to allow us to create an illusion that compels nearby creatures to investigate. By placing this in certain ways, like kind of near encounters and such, you can essentially lure enemies away from the bulk of the fighting, meaning that you can take them out silently and stealthily without other entities getting involved, meaning you can slowly pick off encounters one by one if you're doing that kind of playstyle. It sometimes can be a little bit hard to position it so only one enemy goes to investigate, but if you can do it, then you've got a pretty solid way of opening up combat, and maybe even isolating that person entirely so that you only have to face one combatant at a time, which for us is quite useful. Next up, Poison Spray. There's kind of a theme of poison in Cyric. It's a bit of a minor part of his character, but he does tend to use poison quite a bit. And poison just kind of fits in with like the trickery and deceit angle of things, in my opinion. So we're kind of just like brewing poisons and using them as like kind of a dirty tactic here. So Poison Spray is going to work out quite nicely for us here. It gives us a 1d12 of poison damage to work with. This is going to not only just be kind of a decent alternate damage type for us, but it is also going to trigger some features and abilities that I'll be getting into later. Next up, we do get to choose two spells. Of course, Lies, Trickery, and Deceit. We're going with Disguise Self, as well as Tasha's Hideous Laughter, basically starting to get that idea of madness. Again, up until now, we've kind of just been a regular guy, but maybe now the interesting abilities that we get from Cyric as we slowly start to go mad are starting to seep in, allowing us to spread just that little bit of madness, forcing our enemies to the floor as they laugh, and again, Disguise Self to be able to disguise ourselves as we walk away from whatever murder or whatever we just did, right? Because Cyric didn't just murder. He also did some other stuff, which I'm not going to talk about on YouTube because this video won't last long. Anyways, beyond that, we get to choose a level from the a spell even from the wizard spell list, and of course, we're grabbing Shield. Shield is going to be great for us because we do get more level 1 spell slots than anything out of Arcane Trickster, and Shield is just going to give us a lot more staying power if we do end up having to be in frontline combat. It's also going to synergize quite well with some other things that we'll be getting later, because again, we want to be able to dodge attacks, and because we're going to have really high dexterity with this build, this plus Shield means that we're not going to get attacked too much overall. I found in my testing that we were able to dodge most attacks that came our way, which is great because we are a bit squishy. Next up, at Rogue level 4, we are going to be picking up our first feat, as well as an additional spell from the Trickster spell list. It's really up to you whatever you want to pick here. Charm Person would obviously make sense, but we do have friends for this anyway. But I could see why you might want to pick this up just for the lore reasons. I'm personally going to go with Sleep instead, because I do think it is quite a decent spell that can help us out here. Maybe less so as we get to the later acts, but we can replace it later on. As you can see here, we could replace a spell now, but I'm not going to, as I like the 3 that we have. But I will point out for the level progression of this build that if you go to replace a spell, you get the full wizard spell list to choose from, not just the Arcane Trickster spell list. So at any point there's a spell from the Arcane Trickster spell list that you don't want, you can always replace it on the next level and get anything of level 1 or later on 2 from the wizard spell list. So just keep that in mind. You have a bit more freedom with your spell choices than you might originally think you have. First up, let's get into our first feat. Now, I would probably recommend, at least in the early levels, to just go with a bump to your dexterity for an ability score improvement. However, I'm going to show off our first major feat here. Now, I think this will make sense. We're going Great Weapon Master. Now, we're going to be using a two-handed weapon with this build, and as such, Great Weapon Master means that we're going to be able to add a plus 10 to the damage we're dealing at a cost of a -5 attack roll penalty. But if we're using this strategy, where we're able to, you know, go solo and kind of stealth, if we're always in stealth, we're always going to have advantage, meaning we can offset the penalty for Great Weapon Master by quite a significant margin, as well as if we kill a target or land a critical hit, and we'll have a higher chance to land a critical hit with advantage, as well as if we just straight up kill the target because we do so much damage, we can make another melee weapon attack as a bonus action that turn, meaning we can, once we're revealed, we can quickly attack someone else or try and flee. We have a bit of a choice. Mainly this is just here to kind of stack with our sneak attack damage to just make us incredibly strong, like incredibly strong. So that's the other aspect of this build. Kind of going for as close to one-shot kills, at least on basic enemies, as we can, by just hitting them with a ton of damage from Sneak Attack and Great Weapon Master. Next up, at Rogue level 5, we're going to be picking up Uncanny Dodge. When an attack hits you, you only take half the usual damage. I'm pretty sure this is only once per round, but the ability doesn't say that. I think it's only once per round, at least that's what I found in my testing, but let me know if I'm wrong. And remember, at this point you could also change a spell. I might change Sleep here, just because it is hit point based and we only go up to level 2 spell slots, so it's going to be a bit tricky to get this off, at least when you kind of get to the mid to late game, so in which case you could swap it out for yet another kind of spell here, if you so choose. Since we're kind of going for like a poison thing, I could see Ray of Sickness being good. If you decided you wanted to use Clothing with this build, you could go with Mage Armour. If you want a reliable range damage option, you could go for Magic Missile or Ice Knife. If you want to get a bit more maneuverability, you could go for Enhanced Sleep, Featherfall, or Longstrider. There's a ton of options available to you here, so pick whatever strikes your fancy. Since I'm kind of going with a poisoner theme for this build as well, I'm going to be picking up Ray of Sickness, because Ray of Sickness is not only going to be able to deal a 2d8 of poison damage, it is also going to be able to possibly poison the target. We'll have another way of being able to inflict this condition a bit later on, but poisoned is extremely good for this build. Basically, the target suffers disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. Ability checks is already nice, but attack rolls is what we're here for, because again, we're slightly squishy, so giving all of our opponents disadvantage to hit us just for hitting them with poison damage, which we're going to be able to do rather regularly with this build, that's pretty good for a rogue who wants to kind of slip away. This means that a lot of the time, you won't actually need to disengage with your action or your bonus action in order to be able to get away from a combat encounter. You can just dash and then hide, which is going to be very, very, very valuable if you're going to try and go for a solo playstyle. So poison is going to be very valuable, but again, we'll have a more consistent way of getting this off later. But for now, let's grab Ray of Sickness. Next up at Rogue level 6, we are going to get a couple of skills expertise. I think the game has already set a pretty good one for us here. It's going to give us expertise in sleight of hand and persuasion, and I'm honestly not going to argue. I think that's perfect for this build. You could also replace a spell at this level if you want to, but I'm not gonna. At Rogue level 7, we're going to be able to pick up Evasion, meaning that when a spell or effect would deal half damage on a successful dex save, it deals no damage if we succeed and only half damage if we fail. So now we're just a lot more tanky in general. Attack rolls are not going to hit us as much. We're going to be able to take half damage when we do get hit, and also things like Fireball are going to be much less effective against us. So this build has just gotten a lot more survivability despite our lower constitution, which is great. And again, having that disadvantage on attack rolls and this as well means we're much less likely to drop concentration despite our slightly lower constitution. So it all does kind of work out in the wash. So anyway, we do get another spell at this level, and we're up to level 2, which means we now get to grab Crown of Madness. Crown of Madness allows us to instill madness in a humanoid enemy, making them attack the creature closest to them other than ourselves, even if that creature is allied. It costs our concentration, but that's not a huge deal for us, as we're not really concentrating on anything else at the moment. And Crown of Madness obviously makes sense for what we're going for here. The idea with this build, and you will have seen from the combat footage, is to basically sneak up to a group of enemies, pick the one that is the most powerful, and just cast Crown of Madness on them to basically start a bunch of infighting, causing the higher level enemy to either kill their mobs or wear them down, or even get worn down themselves by their adds, and then being able to swoop in for some quick kills after the fact. Unfortunately, Crown of Madness only lasts for 3 turns, which can be a bit of a downside, but if you're able to remain hidden, once Crown of Madness ends, the combat encounter will end, meaning that you can actually kind of reset the situation, maybe do it again, or go for a different option if you so desire. You'll have a lot of different ways of being able to approach combat with this build, but Crown of Madness is definitely going to be the crux. I mean, at the end of the day, this is more of a roleplay build than anything. This might even be just something you might want to mess around with in the big Baldur's Gate city of Act 3, so I don't know, but I feel like this whole thing is very, very fun to play, and at the end of the day, this is still a build that will work and deal massive damage, even if maybe if you went with a different subclass, you might be able to optimize it a bit more. But hey, maybe that's a video for the future, or something you can do at home. You know, everybody always asks me, okay, I'm just gonna, small rant here, everyone always asks me, oh, how do you get the backgrounds in the character creator? It's a bug. Basically, I'm using a mod that allows me to create custom hirelings, but for some reason their level up screen is bugged and doesn't bring up the actual level up area, so I just get to use whichever background I like. That's great. For video making, it's amazing. But the problem is every time I level up, the model has to load in, and for a split second, it's naked. So you don't know how many times in videos I have to edit out genitals. And I'm gonna have to do it with this one too. Just thought I'd point that out, that, like, well, I'm bringing you this very nice, beautiful aesthetic. There's a reason there's cuts in between every level up. Anyways, let's keep going. At level 8, we're going to be able to pick up a spell from the expanded spell list that we have here, and we have access to all level 2 and 1 spells from the wizard spell list. Now, we kind of already have most of the things I would want for this build. We're only going to have 2 level 2 spell slots by the end of this, which does suck. So you might not want to focus too much on solely level 2 spells. In my testing, I picked up quite a few. Blindness is great. It doesn't require a concentration, so we can use it in conjunction with Crown of Madness, allowing us to blind a creature, meaning attack rolls against it have advantage, and the foe attacks with disadvantage. This can be another way to be able to consistently get off our sneak attacks, even if we're not hiding. Hold Person would be a concentration spell, so you'd have to pick and choose when to use this one, but it would allow us to guarantee that all of our attacks are always critical hits, meaning that as long as we're able to maintain our concentration, maybe if there's only one enemy, we could basically hold them still and then just hit them for great weapon master sneak attack damage over and over and over again. Very, very likely to kill a big boss humanoid enemy. Next up, Mirror Image would also be pretty good. It kind of fits into that Trickster Illusionist vibe, as well as being able to kind of give us a bigger chance to not get hit by increasing our armor class by 9, and that kind of decreases every time that someone misses us. So that can all be pretty valuable, and I did end up having all 3 on the build for testing purposes, but I would definitely make sure you're specializing and picking 1 or 2 of these. I'm going to go with Hold Person, and I am going to change out a spell, I think. I didn't have Ray of Sickness in my original testing, so I think I'll take that out here, since we're probably going to be getting poison damage from a different source by this point in the game. And so I'm going to pick up Blindness instead, because those were the ones I found to be the most valuable. Next up, we are going to be grabbing that Dexterity ability score improvement. It does feel a bit late, but again, because we're getting advantage in so many different ways with this build, having that lower Dexterity to start isn't a huge deal, but we are going to start wanting to bump it up at this point because enemy ACs are increasing. At Rogue level 9, we're going to get something really, really interesting, which I don't think I've ever had a chance to show off, but it's actually really fun. It's one of those things that I believe I suggested in my things I would change about the subclasses video, or whatever I ended up calling that. I kind of said that this feature should really come at an earlier level of Arcane Trickster, because I think it is so core to what makes the gameplay of Arcane Trickster potentially really, really fun and interesting to use, but the fact that you get it at level 9 just is probably what makes this class feel so weak. I honestly think you should get this at level 5, if not level 3. So, Magical Ambush. While you are hidden, your targets have disadvantage on saving throws against your spells. This means that things like Crown of Madness, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Hold Person, whatever have you, have a much higher chance of succeeding just for sneaking at the start of combat, which we already want to do. So I personally think that this is one of the best features for an Arcane Trickster to have. It just sucks that it's this late. Honestly, with the fact that Assassin gets like 3 amazing abilities right at level 3, as well as Thief getting a whole second bonus action at level 3, this should be a level 3 ability, not level 9. I know this is carried over from tabletop. Seriously, come on guys, this should have been way earlier. You had the ability to fix this. I swear when I get my hands on those modding tools. But yes, this is going to be pretty essential to the build, so you're definitely going to want to pick this up. And I will say, Magical Ambush is going to be especially helpful because we're not going to be leveling up intelligence, but thanks to Magical Ambush, we won't really need to most of the time. Anyways, let's keep going. So, cantrips, we do get another one at this level. Finally. Pick whatever you like here. It's not really going to matter. I do use a little bit of acid damage in this build, so I'm going to pick up Acid Splash here, but any of these others will work. Next up, we do get another level 2 spell, and at this point you have a choice, basically between, I would say, Mirror Image, Invisibility, and Blur. Since we're playing as a Dark Urge, we will have access to the Deathstalker Mantle, so if you want invisibility, I personally recommend going down that route, but invisibility here could still work. This is probably where I would pick up Mirror Image, though. I don't think Blur is as valuable to us. I think Mirror Image is going to be a bit better because it doesn't require a concentration, so you can pick this up here. And of course, we do get Rogue's bonus level 10 feat. And I'm going to use this opportunity to take something that everyone in the stream basically said I had to take because it's lore accurate. Mage Slayer. Remember, Cyric killed Mystra, the literal god of magic, the ultimate mage. Maybe this chosen of Cyric has a little bit of a thing against spellcasters, so let's talk about Mage Slayer. When a creature casts a spell within melee range of you, you have advantage on any saving throw against it. Very nice. As well as you can use a reaction to immediately make an attack against the caster. Also very nice, because that's a great weapon master attack. Enemies you hit have disadvantage on concentration saving throws, so this build is going to be great for taking out pesky spellcasters as that may be affecting your whole party. So this build is going to be able to sneak around the battlefield, and if there is someone who is really ruining your day with some really annoying spells, this guy can just sneak up and basically just absolutely destroy them. So very fun little side effect of this build. So yeah, you get some, it's basically just a lore pick. Honestly, if you don't care about the lore side of things, you don't want to get this, you don't have to. By all means, pick up something like Mobile for more movement speed. Pick up Savage Attacker to make it so you always get high dice rolls. Pick up even Spell Sniper could be good. Tough could be great. Warcaster could be really effective here, or even just a bump to your Constitution. I would even say, where is it? Sharpshooter could also be really good. We have Great Weapon Master on this build, so being able to basically do the same thing with ranged attacks would actually be kind of nice. So, it's entirely up to you, but I'm grabbing Mage Slayer because it is the lore option. Again, this is a roleplay build. We got a roleplay here. Next up, at Rogue level 11, we're going to get access to Reliable Talent. Whenever you make an ability check with a skill you are proficient with, the lowest result you can roll on the die is a 10. Very, very fun ability. Just makes you overall pretty damn good at everything, and for us this means our sleight of hand, stealth, and all of our dialogue kind of skills are going to be pretty damn stacked. So you're going to be an amazing face of the party and an amazing infiltrator, as well as being a pretty decent combatant as well. We do also get another Arcane Trickster spell at this point. I don't know, I would say Charm Person or Sleep, probably one of these two. I think we got enough level 2 spells for our very minimal spell slots. And then finally at level 12, you gain an extra feat in which I just maxed out Dexterity to 20. Why have we suddenly changed location and done a sudden jump cut and skipped level 12 entirely? Don't ask, right? It's because I'm an idiot. Anyways, let's get into the equipment. So, like I said, the overall playstyle of this build is to be stealthy and kind of, get sneak attacks in, be able to spread status effects, and then kind of get out of there. So I've kind of used some equipment here to do just that, while still looking fashionable as hell. Let's start off with the main thing that we're going to be kind of working with here is our weapon. I've gone for Larithian's Wrath. I wanted to be able to keep the kind of dex-based aspect of rogue, since we needed a finesse weapon for stealth, while still being able to use a two-handed weapon. So a longsword, which is a d10 of damage while two-handed, is pretty damn good. We do have it buffed up here with the Drakethroat Glaive, because of course we do. We kind of have to when we use these early game weapons in Act 3. So we have a +2 weapon overall here with a plus 1d4 of acid damage. Couldn't get poison, unfortunately, because it's not on the Drakethroat Glaive, but hey, live and learn, I guess. It also comes with a pretty awesome unique attack called Razor Gale, which allows you to kind of attack a bunch of enemies in a cone in front of you, applying the weapon's damage with a little bit of extra slashing damage as well, usable once per short rest. Overall, this is mainly just here to fuel our Great Weapon Master stuff. If you'd rather use the Fowler Alluve, you absolutely can, but I kind of preferred Larithian's Wrath here instead. We've also got the Darkfire Shortbow. This is basically a put whatever you want in the slot type deal. We don't have longbow proficiency, unfortunately, so a shortbow is probably the best you could kind of do aside from maybe dual hand crossbows. But I figured the Darkfire Shortbow here is kind of nice, giving us resistance to 2 common damage types, as well as giving us access to haste once per long rest as well. But anyways, let's get into the rest of the equipment. First off, we've got the Hood of the Weave. I wanted a hood on this build because it looks cool as hell with this outfit, and it kind of gives me assassin vibes, maybe because I played Assassin's Creed growing up. But it does actually really help us out because we gain a +2 bonus to spell safety C and spell attack rolls. Despite the fact that we are kind of reliant on our intelligence-based spells, we only have 16 intelligence, meaning that we don't have the highest spell safety C by default, so the hood helps with that, as well as magical ambush kind of fueling the crux of that feature. But if you wanted to optimize these stats a bit more, go for an Ethel's Boon thing with your dexterity to bump your intelligence up to 18, you could absolutely do that, and in fact this build would absolutely take Ethel's Boon, so I would probably recommend that overall. But of course there are other options for your headpiece if you so choose. If you want an early game option, then the Diadem of Arcane Synergy is quite nice. A lot of the things we do inflict conditions, meaning that this would allow us to use our spellcasting ability modifier to add to the damage of our attacks, making us even stronger. Or you could pick up the other Act 3 option, the Mask of Soul Perception, giving you a +2 bonus to attack rolls, helping to offset that Great Weapon Master penalty, as well as giving you better initiative rolls and perception checks. Initiative rolls will be able to allow us to act a bit quicker if we end up being caught kind of out of our strategy. It also gives you a usage of Detect Thoughts, which can be used for all sorts of trickery, so I think it makes good sense. Basically pick whichever one of these strikes your fancy the most. Next up, the Deathstalker Mantle. As stated before, we are a Dark Urge, and I think this is pretty much the perfect cloak for us. Basically, we're allowed to, once per turn, whenever we kill an enemy, we become shrouded in primeval darkness to become invisible for 2 turns. So, we kill a person, mainly probably in 1 hit, thanks to our setup that we've got here, then we're immediately able to go invisible to either escape the combat or attack someone else, because again, if we kill someone, we can make another attack as a bonus action thanks to Great Weapon Master, so this build has some pretty decent synergy here. Next up, the Elegant Studded Leather. This is going to give us a +2 bonus to initiative rolls and advantage on stealth checks, as well as a usage of shield per short rest. This is the perfect armor for this build. Initiative rolls, we want as much of that as we can get because we want to be able to act first if we ever do get into regular combat. Advantage on stealth checks to allow us to maintain our our kind of stealth position, as well as be able to maintain our invisibility a bit easier, and shield to give us a bit more survivability without needing to use our spell slots on it. Just overall, perfect for this setup. But of course this is an Act 3 option, so an earlier game option would be the Studded Leather +1. You get this from completing a quest, and it's basically just one of the best early game light armors you can get that will do pretty decently all the way up to when you can get the Elegant Studded Leather, so I would just grab this and use that. Next up, we have the Poisonous Gloves. Whenever we deal poison damage, the target needs to succeed a con save or become poisoned. We already went over poisoned, but I'll quickly say it again. Disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. So this will allow us to basically be able to poison on every single bit of poison damage we do, whether that be through poison spray or, jumping ahead a bit, the Brood Mother's Revenge. Whenever the wearer is healed, their weapon becomes coated in magic and deals an additional 1d6 of poison damage. We'll be able to heal ourselves with
potions or what have you normally, but once we get to Act 3 we can pick up the Ring of Regeneration that automatically heals us for 1d4 hit points at the start of every turn, triggering this so we can keep this up without needing to expend any additional resources, like perhaps cleric spell slots if you've got maybe a trickery cleric in your party to go along with this, or potions, as I've already stated. So this will be a pretty decent pickup in Act 1 where you can get it anyway, but it will get better once you reach Act 3 and gain the Ring of Regeneration. I've also gone for the Line Breaker boots on this build. We'll have a lot of freedom to be able to dash, either as an action or a bonus action on our turn, and whenever we do, we can start stacking a Wrath for even more damage, because for those of you that don't know, Wrath means that for every stack of this condition, you have a +1 bonus to damage with melee spells. So, and you can stack this multiple times. So this would give us a +2 for 1 dash normally, but it is actually broken at the moment. It's not once per turn and gives 3 stacks instead. So at the moment, it's actually much more powerful than it should be. This will probably get patched in September. So when this build, when you come back to this build a bit later on, it will be slightly weaker, but the main crux of the strategy is still there. You'll still be able to build up those turns of Wrath quite easily, giving you up to a +7 to your attack, and damage rolls. To your damage rolls, not attack rolls. Meaning that with Great Weapon Master giving you a +10, and this giving you up to a +7, you're going to be dealing a lot of damage, especially with Sneak Attack on top. Holy crap. And it also, I believe Sneak Attack also works for some of our other damage types as well, like our Acid and Poison, so you're just going to be doing a massive amount of damage. So yes, Line Breaker Boots just to absolutely take that one-shot potential into overdrive. And then finally, Killer's Sweetheart. Whenever we kill a creature, your next attack roll will be a guaranteed critical hit. This isn't actually your next attack roll, it's actually a reaction that you can bank to spend on any attack roll you like in the future. So you can basically, again, if you kind of do a strategy of one-shotting a target, and then immediately going and one-shotting another one, you'll be able to kind of kill 2 enemies quite quickly with this setup. So yeah, overall, pretty strong overall kit here. Nothing too crazy, it's pretty standard rogue affair here, with some extra unique mechanics like the poison and the wrath, to really, and obviously the increased spell save DC, which most people normally wouldn't go for, but otherwise this is a pretty standard setup. I think definitely the Elegant Studded Leather is the pinnacle of rogue attire. And I'll quickly go over the dye quick. Everything you see here is coloured in the muddy red dye. I kind of wanted this unified look that was still dark, but not quite like pure black, almost like a darker colour that's been tinted by dried blood. I don't know why I've dramatized it like that. It's just bloody brown. But overall, yes, that is the build. And again, I'll play this very short combat footage quickly, so I won't keep you long. But this build is fun. It is fun. It is a fun kind of way to go about things. Again, playing the whole game like this could be hit or miss. I definitely think that other people have done solo builds that will definitely function better than this one, but as a fun kind of experiment to be able to inflict Crowd of Madness, do these like hit and run tactics and one-shot stuff, it can be extremely fun. And don't get me wrong, this is a strong build. Play with this on Balanced, or probably even Tactician as well. You'll have a fun time. I test all my builds on Tactician, and this build definitely kept up in the power department. Even though it can't poison or do whatever to steal watches, it still absolutely destroys them. Like, again, Great Weapon Master is just amazing in that regard. You'll be absolutely fine with this build. Honor mode, solo, it gets iffy. At least in Balanced or Tactician, you should be fine, but Honor mode, definitely not. But I think just, again, the kind of fun things you can do with the Mage Hand, being able to use things like Tasha's and Crown of Madness to just get, you know, fun combat situations going on, because, again, Tasha's knocks people prone, you get advantage on all your attacks and such like that. I think there's a lot of fun stuff to work with here. I think it's an interesting playstyle. I think it fits really, really well into what I was going for here. Again, normal person who slowly gets these madness powers over time. Again, playing too much Elden Ring lately. And, you know, I do think it can work. I don't necessarily think it's the strongest build I've ever made. I do think I could very easily make a stronger version of this if I did kind of allow myself to multi-class. Again, maybe you want some enchantment wizard levels in here. Entirely up to you. Feel free to. This is kind of like a base skeleton, a base idea. Take this and tweak it however you like. I personally liked getting the maximum sneak attack damage as well as the extra feat from level 10, but obviously you can mess around with this, tune it to your liking. I could even see Rogue 10, Enchantment Wizard 2. Yes, you'd lose that on a feat, but just drop Mage Slayer and just get the ability score improvements anyway. I could definitely see that working for you, but I think as a lore build, it's great. I think as a roleplay build, it's fun. I think as something to kind of experiment with, I think it's definitely a fun and interesting playstyle. Test it with teammates, see if it performs a bit better maybe than in my testing, because it did struggle on larger encounters. but it definitely works great in the early game. For level 4, I would say this build was actually the most fun in the level 4 to 6 range, definitely. Going through Moonrise Towers or the Goblin Camp with this build is extremely fun. Just stealth tactics in those areas in general are just very, very interesting. But overall, I definitely think that this build will drop off a little bit into Act 3, but then again, you can change it up and kind of optimize it to the way you think it would work. Hell, take out Arcane Trickster entirely and just swap to Assassin. You'll probably get a lot of success there. Or heck, you could even technically try and do something with Thief, maybe go for, like, you could use 2 bonus action dashes per turn to get Wrath stacked up really quickly and then go from there. Entirely up to you. You will have a bunch of opportunities to kind of experiment and play around with this build at your leisure. And just do whatever works for you. Again, this was kind of a fun thing to experiment with, building with pure Arcane Trickster, which I haven't done ever, I think. It was kind of fun to do. So I really hope you enjoyed this one, despite the fact that it might not be one of my strongest builds I've ever made, but it is definitely one of the most fun. When I say it's not one of my strongest, it's got a freaking great weapon master, it can do like hundreds of damage. It's absolutely strong, but just not in the conventional way. You just have to play a bit differently to make it work perfectly. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now. In fact, because my voice is starting to go, I think I might have caught a bug again. Oh dear. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Please tell me I was not muted that entire time. I was, wasn't I? Motherfucker, I was.